Plyometrics is a tricky category of exercises to incorporate into your training for a lot of different reasons. And in this video, I'm going to explain 4 different tips for how you can begin with plyometrics. This video is not going to be an exhaustive list of all the different plyometric options and what the different benefits of the different types of plyometrics are. This is going to be a video explaining 4 different tips for getting started with plyometrics, and I will use an example plyometric exercise as a good beginner plyometric movement. So the first tip with plyometrics is that the number of repetitions and the load is quantified by the number of ground contacts that you make, which may sound a little bit obvious, but as you start to go on a deeper plyometric journey, it's easy to do too many. It's really easy to do too many plyometrics. So you usually need to do a little bit of plyometrics to get a big result. You don't need a lot of volume in plyometrics, and you really only need like 15 repetitions of a jump per workout. And if you're going to do it twice a week, that gets you 30 ground contacts a week, is a really safe place to begin, especially if you start with a double leg movement like I'm going to explain here shortly. So thinking about it in terms of ground contacts is the first thing to do, and you want to keep it generally low. 30 per week is a really safe place to start, split in between 2 sessions. The second tip is that the easiest type of plyometric exercise to start with is one that focuses on landing, and one that focuses on landing softly. Box jumps are pretty popular, but they obviously incorporate the up component and sometimes as well the down. And the up part of jumping is typically harder than the landing. So doing something as simple as stepping up onto the box and then just jumping off of it and landing with 2 feet is a really easy beginner plyometric to get started with. And if you haven't worked on that, it's a really good place to start. And you want to think about landing really softly. You don't want to be making a huge ruckus, and you want to be landing very, what's the word? You want to be landing very precisely, and you want to be controlled with it. You don't want to be loose. Okay, you want to be firm when you land and try to do it as softly as you can. So first tip is to keep the dosage low and to think about it as ground contact. Second tip is to focus on the landing. The third tip is going to be you're going to need to rest in between your sets more than you think you need. Plyometrics, if done correctly, shouldn't actually make you feel tired. You shouldn't feel out of breath when you're doing plyometrics. You shouldn't feel really fatigued when you're doing plyometrics. The point is to focus on quality of execution. So with doing sets of, let's say, 5 jumps off of a box, after you do your 5 reps, you want to rest for a minimum of 1 minute, okay? Maybe even 2. And the reason for that is because the plyometrics is taxing and is using a neuromuscular system. You're training a neuromuscular system when you do plyometrics. And the fatigue of that system, you don't really feel in the same way as like a muscle burn. And you basically just want to give yourself plenty of rest, more than you think you need, to allow the neuromuscular system to fully recover in between your sets. Because if I was to say, hey, let's do 3 sets of 5 jumps off of a box, you could do those 5. It would feel super easy, and you'd probably feel ready, and you'd have the energy to go, and maybe you could do all 15 back to back to back. But that's missing the point. It's not about trying to get tired. It's about focusing on quality of each repetition and giving the neuromuscular system enough rest in between each set of 5 to recover and have good quality of each rep. The last tip for plyometrics is to do them earlier in your workout. They don't necessarily need to be first. I usually like to get people warmed up before we do the round of plyometrics, but If you do them later, your neuromuscular system is really taxed. So I typically don't like to do it at the end of a workout. It's good to be fresh, warm, but fresh. So if you're trying to get into plyometrics, it's really easy to start with a jump off a box. So you're thinking about the landing. Start with a low number. So something as easy as 3 sets of 5 twice per week at most gets you 30 contacts over the course of a week. And if you think about landing really softly, that's a really good thing to do. Rest amply in between the sets, and then put that plyometric exercise earlier in your workout rather than later.